movement in France, which has been going on for the last 8 or 9 months across the Lathe. My name is Branden. I'm going to be your moderator. I'm from Speak Out Now. I'm going to first just tell you briefly the format. I'm going to introduce you to our group, and then I'm going to tell you just very briefly why we felt like this was an important presentation to give and an important topic to discuss. The format first will be my little introduction for about 5 minutes. Then I will turn it over to Laura and Kris, who are our comrades in France, and they will be talking about their experiences and what they've seen there and how they've sort of been a part of the Yellow Vest movement throughout these months. And then we're going to open it up to questions. So about 5 minutes on me, about 15 minutes with them, and then questions. We'd like you to be able to ask as many questions and get as much from the value of their first-hand experience as is possible. And we want to learn as much as possible about this interesting sort of social movement. First, let me just briefly tell you about our organization, Speak Out Now. We are a revolutionary socialist organization. We are Trotskyists. We are based mainly in the San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland and Berkeley area. For more than 10 years now we've been active, but in the last 3 or 4 years we've been establishing a group here on the East Coast, not only in the New York, New Jersey area, but also in Baltimore. In addition to participating in various other social movements and carrying out regular political education, our primary aim is to build an organization rooted in the working class in order to intervene in workers' struggles today. We have had some success in doing this in the San Francisco Bay Area, where we have had activity in some hospitals and in the transportation industry. We are interested in dialogue and perhaps even working with others who are engaged in similar projects or agree on the importance of revolutionaries prioritizing working class activity. We are joined today by these 2 comrades who are a member of the fraction, La Tencel, of the new anti-capitalist party in France, and they organize there on a similar basis to how we do so here. So the question then is, why are we here to learn about the Yellow Vest? Why is this topic worth talking about? Well, first, we believe that the Yellow Vest movement shows the importance of the self-activity of the working class and shows their power when they remain determined to rely on their own forces and not on others to speak for them, like traditional parties, the heads of unions, etc., people, bureaucratic types who often workers look to for leadership. It also shows how people are transformed through a movement. Workers enter a struggle as they are, sometimes with a very mixed consciousness, many illusions, and maybe even right-wing ideas. But through their continued efforts and their willingness to discuss openly and learn, they can quickly change many of their views. It also highlights a sector of the working class. Well, you're still close to the working class.
We can't, it's too high.
Oh, okay.
They'll stop it.
Okay. The movement also shows how a sector of the working class that has been ignored for a long time and is likely the most numerous section of the working class in France and the US, and those are workers who are not in unions. They're often unorganized, they're often in small shops, and they're often outside of the large cities, but these workers can be a potentially revolutionary force. It has also demonstrated a form of democratic organization that can be very powerful as new struggles emerge elsewhere. Small town, working class, democratic, general assemblies. And 2 final points. It serves also to highlight as an important reminder that real social change can only come about when the working class itself is organized and when that working class leads its own struggles. And finally, the movement is also a reminder that today, despite many changes in its composition, the working class is still, without a shred of doubt, the only class with the real potential for revolutionary change in modern capitalist society. And with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Kris and Laura, who are going to tell us a little bit about the movement.
Thank you. So, as Branden said, it's kind of a working class movement that we haven't seen for like many years in France. Everyone saw at the TV show the clashes with the police in Paris, but it was the barricades were almost all over the France, especially in rural and working class areas. Some days somehow people just don't accept the present situation, and so one of the main points of the Yellow Vest movement is a revolt of the working class in that sense, it's quite different from all the movement we have known in these last years in Europe.
So just here, it's the beginning. It's a yellow vest that was used for the first day of protest. It was the 17th of November, and it's open-ended protest. And the goal is very clear. We want a higher standard of living, and it shows how it was from the beginning a working class movement.
So the yellow vests are a lot of people who never done politics before. It's pieces of working class who learn together to do politics and who use political reference, like here is a reference to the French Revolution of 989. And it means, is it a revolt? No, sir, it's a revolution. It's from a movie about the French Revolution. And all those aspects are considerably metamorphosing the states of mind of many people about social and political movements. They wanted their voice to be heard, and they wanted to decide when hundreds of thousands working class people think that they are able to do so. It changes everything.
So here it's at the beginning of the movement. People are saying we are at the first day of the French Revolution of 1789. And it was very striking going into protest that you could see a lot of yellow vests like this one.
A new sense of common identity came around. The yellow vests could see themselves as a family. One of the main leaders of the yellow vest called the movement the family. And it's difficult to describe this atmosphere, but for instance, friendships and love stories had grown so much on round about an demonstration. It is like a gorgeous political atmosphere changing. It was impossible to imagine it 2 years or maybe 2 weeks before. It's difficult to tell. How can I explain the taste of chocolate if I never test it? It's like the shit. So we can recognize the people because they were quickly transforming themselves. They were going to their first demonstration ever and learned step by step more than few years of militantism. The government knew it, and so that's why they were very afraid of the movement. They prepared the exit to the French president through helicopter like it happened in Argentina or Tunisia. It could make us smile, but they thought about that. They increased social aids, and some poorer workers earn maybe 10 or 15% more than the end of the month. A lot seems to be possible for the first time, but what was to be done? What could a revolutionary small group as we are can do in this situation? What can far left organization can do on the Yellow Vest movement, and how can do it? I will explain that by a little experiment on the Yellow Vest movement with few examples from my town in Strasbourg. It's the east of the France, just near Germany. So in Strasbourg, we are a little group of revolutionary militants involved in the Yellow Vest movement. So our group have really joined the movement during the third weeks. It was the 1st of December. The third act was a demonstration which started from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. And this demo was called by the leaders organized on a Facebook page called La France en colère, Angry France, it means. And around 6,000 people were here from all the roundabouts of Alsace and Lorraine, are the two countries of the east. It was a really dynamic demonstration with lots of slogans as Macron démission, it means Macron must resign, or they were singing the French national anthem. So the name of the demonstration has known first end at the Republic Place, a famous place in Strasbourg, and that was the last point which was sworn to the authorities. So the time after this point became illegal. That a lot of people wanted to carry on the demo in the city centers because it was the time of the Christmas market, and for them it was very important to go through the Christmas market to make the movement more popular to all the people who come to the Christmas market. But other people were afraid of the possibility that some of the Yellow Vests could riot and destroy the market. And some others thought that we could continue the demonstration to just another place and leave the marketplace. So people wanted to stop the demo, people wanted to join a national trade union demo about precarity from the CGT, which is a big trade union. But the demo of the CGT were in another place because the union bureaucracy wanted to divide the movement by calling for another protest. So we proposed to make a general assembly. It means that we organize a collective discussion in the place, the Republic place, to point what the point was to collectively discuss about what we wanted to do. All those different points of view I explained before had been defended. We made a hand vote to know what point of view is the most shared, and so we decided collectively to join the CGT demo. And around 400 people consciously followed us, but going to the union protest was not enough for this kind of situation, and we knew it. The idea of going to the Christmas market had been discussed, and most of people wanted to go there after the CGT demo. So when we had the occasion to went through the security barrage, to do a long demo around the center of the town, and so we were on the Christmas market, and all the people was quite happy to see the Yellow Vest in this situation. And what I am explaining is it was the first General Assembly, the first true movement of democracy in Yellow Vest. Not through social networks for the first time, but through actual discussion and votes. It convinced people that was proper way to do, and people that never experienced democracy before. So after this first General Assembly, we proposed to do the same thing the week after, because the Yellow Vest movement is divided into different acts. Every Saturday's afternoon there is a big demonstration, and so week after week we have reflection about what we are going to do. And so we proposed to do the same thing the week after, and even the people which doesn't agree with this idea of General Assembly, who thought that it's too much speaking and wasting time, came the week after. Funny fact, they came to express themselves about their disagreements. And at the first time, it was our proposal, but week after week, it became the thing that everything wanted to do, every person wanted to do, to know what is the best plan for the demo after, to share ideas and information about the national movement. So now, every Saturday, there is a General Assembly at the Republic place before the demo. And those General Assembly, everybody listens to everybody. There is no voice more louder than another, because everybody respects the principle of democracy. Some Yellow Vests wanted to prepare this General Assembly to make a more solid, I don't know the name, to be best project for the demo, and just to propose it during the General Assembly. So we have also created a headquarters known as Strasbourg Republic Place Headquarters, because of the place where we do the General Assembly, where all the Yellow Vests of Strasbourg can get organized, where they can write leaflets and take position about this or that. I will talk about these discussions after. But meeting on Saturday was not enough. and people asked that we should meet more often, and the headquarters meets also on Monday to plan the thing we do during the week, like leafleting, for instance. After 3 months of movement, the Strasbourg Republic Place headquarters has launched the regional coordination initiatives to all the other headquarters of the East. It was on the 24th of February. We meet 150 yellow vests from 38 headquarters, and altogether we decided to do at least just once a month a regional demonstration. We tried also to lay the foundations for a possible national coordination for the movement that was lacking. So during the 16th of March, it was a big national demo in Paris. The East coordination made a big banner that you can see here. That's the aim with the aim of coordinate had become a slogan. The banner was a point where we can find each other, on where we had distributed leaflets about what we tried the same day. We had launched a national coordination initiative in which we meet 400 yellow vests from 71 headquarters, and we had discussion about a national call to continue and coordinate the movements. Our aim was to give to all those present yellow vests that the democracy is something to build and not just something to ask to the government. In fact, we were learning all together how democracy works, with all problems it supposes. Meetings were pretty long. That was a different point of view, sometimes like verbal fights, etc. It is not like coordinating for coordinating. The goal was to carry out a political program that emerged from the movement on social and political issues, wages, true democracy, ecological issues, and so on. Media and government said, like in big social movement, that protesters didn't have any true demands, but it was actually because they didn't know what to give to stop the movement that they was asking for a social and political change. The headquarters is the place where we think about what we're gonna do for the next act or for the act after, and so it became a place for political discussion. For example, we wanted to do an act about the women's rights on the 9th of March, the day after the day of the fighting women for the rights of women. And so we were defending a decent life for a few months, lower of the price of everything and increase wages. So why not extending it to women that are the more exploited at work than the men? And some people of the headquarters said, no, it's a way on which we're gonna lose our first revendication. And someone else answered, but from the beginning, all the revendications have been transformed as we are transforming ourselves. So it's just a little extract from the discussion, but it was a discussion of 2 hours. 2 hours to make the headquarters agree about doing a demo which passed by temporary work agencies for personal care with a special leaflet. 2 hours of discussion about a subject that we almost never speak about outside.
Left milieu.
Yeah. Place of women on capitalist production. How can we win about our revendication? A lot of revendication or just some few? How is it possible to make the junction between the Yellow Vest and the other militant group? This movement offers the possibility to defend our point of view, our politic on many subjects, to discuss really deeply with large parts of the working class. That seems to be one of the most important opportunity offered by this very particular situation. And yes, some Yellow Vests has voted for the far right during the presidential election, because as a lot of people, working class is not interested about this question, they arrived at this particular movement with a lot of stupid ideas on the head, and we had seen that is one of our role to have discussion with them, and this was possible thanks to the Yellow Vest movement. So coordinating the movement was also a way to survive, even if we were isolated, because after the first month extension, we crushed by repressions, and the bosses gave bonuses to the workers and big plans in order to prevent them from joining the movement. They were talking about the movement, but not strike. And youth protests were brutally crushed.
Yeah, for instance, it's very far from Paris. It's 1 hour and 30 minutes through car. And there were high school protests, and the police just take 150 high school students and they put it in front of the wall like that for 1 day. And here it's just a striking image, but it takes place in every working class area where high school students were protesting.
So the Yellow Vest atmosphere makes this happen, and the Yellow Vest have seen what's going on for the students and for the high schoolers, and after this they were communicating politics.
What are the high schoolers protesting?
Against the reform.
There was a reform in education, but actually it was not the point, because this reform of education, it is discussed since 3 or 4 years, and even now there are strikes of teachers against this education reform. But the point was, there was a riot the Saturday, and actually it began on the 3rd of December. There was the first riot in 17th November, the second riot in the
8th?
No, in the 24th of November, and the 1st of December was a huge protest all over France with barricades. So the 3rd of December, high school students just wanted to join. And that's all the point. Here it's a picture taking in the university nearby Paris, where you got like 3,000 students meeting in order to discuss, and it's 5th of December, so just after it. So there is an atmosphere that is from the Yellow Vest, but it's also going to other segment of society, working class, high school students, and some other place.
To give a feeling of the situation is because there was the movement of the Gilets jaunes and all the riots during the weekend that the high schooler wanted to do. And for example, in front of high school, they were singing with a megaphone. They were singing Gilets jaunes, and it's a song about the Gilets jaunes. It's like it was the ambience to revolt, so everybody take his revendication for own. And
demand is the word you want.
Demands.
Yes.
Revendication is demands. Okay, demands.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so the bourgeoisie was afraid of the possibilities of the situation, and it lasted for months. Last week, some intern document of the
So actually the bourgeoisie was afraid of the atmosphere, and us, revolutionaries, we thought it was the case for 1 week, 3 weeks, maybe 1 month. Actually, there were some intern documents of the Prime Minister offices that were released last week, and these documents are saying that they were afraid till the month of April, things that we couldn't even guess. Why was they afraid? It's because also the political atmospheres, it's mainly in November or in December, but in December everyone was thinking or trying to organize general strike. That didn't happen, for sure, because the bosses, they gave bonuses to some layers of the working class aristocracy. But for months, the atmosphere was still there. And the main example is the fact that after this kind of strikes, this is a strike of hospital workers that is taking place for 2 months, and hospital workers are asking for 300 euros per month. They want 300 euros more on their wages per month. 300 euros, it has been indicated that, that workers didn't ask for this kind of demands. Since the 80s, it didn't happen in France. 300 euros, it's the money that the bosses have taken back from our pockets since the 70s, and the turn and the fact that the attacks of the bosses on working class didn't meet proper answers by the workers. 300 euros, it's one of the demands that the far left has in its program for elections, but also for everyday activities. But actually, to say it truly, we are not so much asking for it, because it's in our program. The people never demanded this kind of a wage hike in months before. But here, hospital workers are asking for it. Teachers, they are talking about wages that they didn't do in the last period, and even in the private sector, it's the place that is happening. So what we are facing right now is the fact that tens of thousands of Yellow Vest activists are still meeting every week in some places where there weren't working class meetings since the decreasing of the CP, in small cities in the countryside and stuff like that, and they are still meeting 1 week, twice a week, and they want to continue to fight. And now the point is, how could they do, and what kind of other struggles will be there? So what will they do is a question mark, but now there are still a lot of possibilities, and this kind of atmosphere that we face in November and December, where everything was possible, is still in the head of a lot of Yellow Vest people, as well as nurses that are striking on this image. So we finished. We've been brief, I hope. So now the discussion is open.
Yeah, just to let you know, I'd like to ask you all if you're we'll take questions or statements, but please limit yourself to 3 minutes, no more, to give everybody and a bunch of people this chance to speak. And I'll try to monitor and keep track of who's being, putting their hands up. And also, I'm just going to let you know, if you want more information on this, there's a sign-in sheet right here. I'm just going to pass it around. No obligation, but if you want more information, etc.
Do you know how to lower the temperature in the room?
I have no idea.
That's all.
A guy said to us that he's trying to, but...
So I see 3 people right off the bat. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 over there. Go ahead, sir.
What's the meaning of the yellow vest? Is it in the back of a truck? The trunk of the car, the requirement in the car? Is that the symbolic? Is that your interpretation?
Or in case you have an accident.
Yeah. For the first demands, do you know?
The origin of the name.
No, the actual
Maybe we can take 3 or 5 questions and then we answer.
Okay, we can do that. So one is on the origins of the yellow vest and where that idea comes from. You first.
Yeah, I have a question about, are there prevalent attitudes in the movement about the May 1968 French student uprisings? I'm really interested in the May 68 movement. We have a panel tomorrow about boycotting student debt, and I think I'd love to know what the French student movements in particular are thinking about with that legacy of French student uprisings.
Got that? I see you. Got it? Okay.
Yes. My question is this. The Yellow Vest seems to be a national movement, but within that context, I would imagine you have people of all political stripes, all the way on the right to all the way on the left. How do you find these separate groups function together? Is there a general consensus where the Yellow Vest is first and the personal political ideology kind of goes in the backseat?
I see.
My name is Dan Norton. I'm from the internationalist group of the League for the Fourth International. The Yellow Vest movement is a very big opportunity, as the speaker said, to intervene for the working class. But I think it's very important to understand this is a multi-class movement. It's heavily petty bourgeois, not the richest petty bourgeois. Many of them barely make the minimum wage. But I think it's necessary to divide this movement on class lines, because it's not just a few people vote for the far right. First of all, the Rassemblement National, as far as we're concerned, is a fascist organization. It's not just far right. They're a threat to the working class and to minorities and so on. And I think it's necessary to basically split it along class lines to win the best elements to the leadership of the working class. But in order to do that, you have to have a working class that's actually fighting for demands that are in the interests of all of the oppressed sectors of society and so on. Right now we have the problem of the bureaucracy, which basically is blocking these struggles, and in fact initially wanted to write off the Yellow Vests as some kind of a right-wing conspiracy. So that had to be resisted. I think the important point is that in order to do this, this is like a populist movement. We had a number of those in Europe. You had the Indignados in Spain and Portugal. You had the occupation of the squares in Greece. You had Nuit debout in France. And they come and they go because they do not have the possibility of bringing down capitalism. In these attacks, what they're talking about, whether it's the increasing inequality, or specifically the raising of the gas tax, these are international capitalist attacks. They're doing it all over the world. They're doing it in Haiti, they're doing it in Mexico, they're doing it in Brazil. These are ordered internationally. And in order to fight against that, I think we need to raise a transitional program of measures that concretely go against capitalism. We have a section in Brazil that had a trucker strike May of last year. A lot of the bureaucracy wrote it off, just like in France, and we said that the oil workers should move in, take the lead, and occupy the oil plants, set up a gas pump outside the oil plants, charge $1 per liter of gasoline. You'll see the axis of that movement change very quickly, and you'll isolate the right-wing sectors. But in order to do that, you have to attack capitalism. I think in France, concretely, the key demand is to fight for full citizenship for all immigrants, because the lack of the connection between the Yellow Vests and the labor bureaucracy and the large, huge immigrant population in places like Saint-Denis, for example, in the 93, 85, these are very important to make those connections, because that will revolutionize the class struggle in France. And until you raise those kinds of demands that are going directly against capitalism, to talk about democracy, it simply is not going to happen under capitalism. This system cannot afford the democracy, and that's why we need to build a revolutionary party, a Trotskyist party, a Leninist party that fights for those demands. Thank you.
First, I'd like to say I've been on the left for a long time. We had a women's movement. I haven't seen somebody not do a progressive staff in 10 years, where 5 men are called on. The one woman who has her hand up is being told, I see you, I see you. And I find that very objectionable. If your revolutionary party is not for all of us, forget about it. So my question, I'm really thrilled with what you said about the assemblies. I'm not so thrilled about a conversation I had yesterday with a very close lefty friend in Paris. A couple of months ago, when I was on the phone with her, she was waxing enthusiastic about what she'd been doing. Yesterday, she said to me, I have no more sympathy with them because of the anti-Semitism. Can you talk about what she's talking about and what's the role of anti-Semitism and what you're doing to combat it?
Maybe
we'll take 5 or 6, right?
5 questions and then I will. So the yellow vest, actually the yellow vest is two things. It's something that you have in your car if there is a car crash, so then you can put it on you. But it's also what a lot of workers are wearing day to day for their activity. So from the beginning, it was like car driver things, but also worker stuff. For instance, and not only yellow, because if you look at, for instance, this one, it's a kind of vest for railway workers. And just on the air, you can see that I'm the fifth generation of railway workers, and I'm proud to be. And I can translate the other one also if you want. So the point was, it was a working class. It was a working class clothes. I think it's the main idea. Here we go to the class line. I don't agree to say that it was a petit bourgeois movement at the beginning, because the issue were on taxes and on fuel price. For sure, some fringe of the petit bourgeoisie were there, because they were taxi drivers, they were like teamster, like all right. You see that, and they were there. But after 2 or 3 weeks, they left the roundabouts. They never came in the general assemblies that were organized by far left people. The point is, for us, and it's the beginning of all our reasonment on that, it was popular uprising, and a popular uprising of a fringe of the working class. It's a kind of stuff that we hadn't seen since years. The last time was that we said it so loudly. It was during the riots in the suburbs in 2005. And for us, it was the beginning of our analysis. After saying that, everything is possible to discuss what kind of program, what kind of demands and stuff like that. But for us, it was that. And it's very different from Nuit Debout, from what was happening in Greece place. If you look at it from here, it could look like it's the same. People are discussing. They could have the same kind of ideas about democracy, about discussing about stuff like that. But whenever they engage into fights, they will have to have their own demands that are working class demands. What is the point? For instance, a point that you made about immigrant workers. Actually, it's one of the main points of the far right in France, because we are talking right now about the yellow vest, but there is also a rise of the far right all over Europe, and the narrative is very strong. They are saying maybe a little bit, like you said, I'm not saying that it's what you meant, but like, you know, the yellow vest, it's some fringe of the working class from the countryside, from small cities, and you know, black people from the suburbs are workers, they will never join it. It's not completely untrue, because in some part of the Paris or the Lyon region, immigrant workers have been concentrated in some neighborhoods. It's not like in the US, because it's less segregated, but they are also there. The point is, like, even that is wrong, because if you look at the movement of the Yellow Vest movement, it's a working class movement from the countryside. And a lot of industries in France are not nearby the big cities, they are in the countryside. And that's also why the fuel demand was very strong. It's because people that were going to work in factories, they were living in the countryside, and they had to take their cars for 1 or 2 hours every day. And one of the main idea that every activist that went on roundabouts on the first and 2 weeks, people were saying that I'm not able to go to work because I'm not able to pay for the fuel price. In this sense, it was also a class demand. Another step that was there, it was an idea about democracy. We are tired of these people that we elected, and when they are elected, they do something else from which they are elected. So for a lot of people, it was kind of clear what they didn't want to. They didn't want to be poor, they didn't want to not be able to afford some fuel. They didn't want to elect people for 4 or 5 years, but it was like it's the case in a lot of political situations. People, especially working people, they know that they don't want, but knowing exactly what they want, it's there that the political fight begins. So for us, organizing this kind of general assembly, it was a way to discuss every point of a political program. For instance, we took the example of women issue, that we thought a lot about that. Also, what is democracy, what is wages, what is taxes, and stuff like that. So from the movement, some demands emerge. That, for instance, if I take the hospital workers, was at the end very close from us. But for sure, and no one is saying that, the demands of the Yellow Vests are still quite low. It's the demands of the popular uprising against the French government. But the point for us was to struggling inside. And not saying, all right, we got a transitional program, it's the right one, but it was going to fight within it. That is the main argument that you will find among the French left and French far left, where a lot of people were saying, all right, we got the program, we need some parties to agree on this one, but for us, dual power, it means that the real power was in the General Assembly of the Yellow Vests, and if strikes would happen, and everyone in December, maybe we missed some opportunities on the roundabouts because we stayed in the factory, and we thought that we will have more weight staying in the factory in order to organize a strike if some general strike will spread. If it was a failure, strike didn't happen unless at local level. But it was our main goal, and from there, within the popular uprising of the direct uprising of the working class on workplace, we'll have to be able to put the movement further. But it was not the case, and then we had to decide what to do with the remaining situation. It led us to May 68 and the movement. For us, of course, May 68, it's a revolt of a fringe of society, the students, that, and it's the more important step, push tens of millions of workers to went in strike in France. So for us, it was kind of the same idea. It's how a fringe of society can take other people with it. Among May 68 especially, actually we did the same thing. We said if you look at this place, for instance, it's a protest. It's a wild protest that we organized in Paris. Because the riots of the Gilets jaunes were happening on Saturday. It means that you had all week to be in other places. So, for instance, we organize strikes in universities, and if you look at this picture, you will not see that the students are wearing yellow vests. Anyway, you can see here, there is some of our comrades in France. Our goal was to say that the students had the same interest as the yellow vests. They were fighting. And it's also linked with the immigrant issue. They were fighting against a fee hike for foreign students. That was very strong in France because in France, the university, they want to expel the people from North Africa or from West Africa in order to hire Chinese students that have more money. So they will hike their fee in order to expel the poor students. Anyway, we were trying to push the idea that it was the same fight against the government, and also the case of foreign students should be defended. And anti-Semitism. From the beginning, through social media, the far right was quite important on it, and also on this issue of anti-Semitism. If we look in Strasbourg, for instance, where the comrade is from, it's a place nearby Germany where actually there are two cities with a lot of Jews in France, Paris and Strasbourg. And there in Strasbourg, some yellow vests that were far right, they organized protests from the parliament, and then they wanted to go to the Jewish neighborhood and then go to other places. That was for us it was a crazy idea. We couldn't accept that. So we were calling for other places to meet in order that we didn't go to the Jewish neighborhood, and we discussed it very seriously with every people that came in the General Assembly. Some far-right people came there, and after days and weeks of discussion, they made a point of going, and I'm talking about people that voted for the Rassemblement National at the place before. Because I don't agree that it's a fascist organization, but it's a far-right organization with a lot of racism ideas. And Rassemblement National, it's people that say that the massacre of Jews in World War II, it's the details of history. So we had to convince them through daily discussion that we needed to organize, that they needed to join a meeting against anti-Semitism, and we won actually. When at the beginning it was not so much the case. So we were trying to fight it. There were also street battles against anti-Semites in street in Paris or in other places. So I think, and it's a general trend of the movement, that ideas change in it, and that anti-Semitism didn't grow or was weakened in it. I mean, but I don't know where your friend was exactly, because for us it's very difficult. We are in some cities where maybe 150. We don't know what's happening in other places of France.
Just to answer to the question of the anti-Semitism too, there had been a little isolating act. They did some Yellow Vest did some things about the Jewish, but it was very minority, and the principal medias said that okay, they are all anti-Semitism, and so we had to fight against this too, because there was some Yellow Vests who had like shitty ID, and because of the media speak all the time about anti-Semitism, it was why there was a big meeting by all the Jewish to say no, we are not anti-Semit, and a lot of Yellow Vests after discussion think that it's important for Yellow Vests to go there to show that no, the Yellow Vests are not anti-Semit, and it's true. One of the girls who defended, after discussion, who defended that on the headquarters was a girl who had voted for the Rassemblement National few months before. So yeah.
One last point about immigrant workers, because it's a point that is I think well said in the American far left, is that here you can see in this picture there is a La Courneuve banner. That is a city just in the suburb of Paris with a lot of immigrant workers. And at the beginning of the movement, I was agree with you. For us, it was like for me it was a white working class revolt. So some younger activists, they wanted to make a point, and they say, all right, let's put the Yellow Vest and we'll go in the suburbs where there are almost no white workers. They went there and they organized their Yellow Vest meeting group in this city. Here it's at the end of the movement. We are maybe in March, so there were 8 or 9,000 arrestations. So people that didn't were afraid to join. But in everyday meeting, in this kind of protest, because it's a riot in the center of Paris. But in everyday meeting, a lot of immigrant workers came to the meeting.
Before somebody, I forget who asked a question about national political variations and how different groups work together, and how well they did that or how badly they did that. So I don't know if you could talk to that.
I think it's one of the main points of what we try to do as revolutionary activists. Because the point of the government was to say, you don't have Yellow Vests who they are. What are their demands? They are not organized, they're just rioters, they don't have any demands, with a lot of class disdain. And our point was to try to organize the movement, because if the government was facing something coordinating with demands, it would have been a much more bigger problem for them. So we tried to do that from Strasbourg for one place, through discussion where should go the protest, then regional level and then national level. But actually we failed. We can say that people were a lot organized at local levels, but they were never a national voice for the movement.
I think I saw two hands at least. You and then you.
You called on me first?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Just to go back to the anti-Semitism question, if I may, were you hindered in your attempts to educate against anti-Semitism by the EU definition of anti-Semitism and the Labour Party in England definition of anti-Semitism that includes a critique of the occupation or criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic, or implies that criticizing Israel or trying to stand up against the influence of his internal influence of Israeli foreign policy is considered anti-Semitic?
Good question.
You want to take one more? Go ahead.
Sorry. My name is Maeve. I'm a member of the Revolutionary Internationalist Youth, the youth group of the American section of the LFI, the League for the Fourth International. So I was recently at the Fête de l'Ouvrier, and I saw a lot of things. And you know, being in France is very different than the U.S., and so I was trying to get an idea of how things work there. And so while I was there, while I was in Paris, not actually at the Fête, I encountered some immigrant workers, and they had seen that we had a publication that featured an article about the Gilets jaunes. And the reaction to this movement by the immigrant workers that I encountered was so distant. They did not conceive of themselves as having anything to do with this movement. This was not something that on a broad level they identified with or felt was important. And I think that, you know, one of the things that we need to understand about a movement like this is that it needs to include immigrant workers. It absolutely needs to include immigrant workers. It's necessary. And so that's why the transitional demand, as Jan had said, of full citizenship rights for all immigrants is vitally important to a struggle like this and to seizing the opportunity that is presented by the Gilets jaunes. So while I was at the Fête, I also saw different left groups that I don't usually get a chance to interact with in the United States. And there was a couple of problems with the way that they were approaching this. So on one side, you have almost total abstentionism on the part of Luc Duvray, for instance, who is saying, nous ne sommes pas gens, nous sommes communistes révolutionnaires, right? They want to completely distance themselves from this movement. But then on the other side, you have groups sort of tailing after it and putting a lot of confidence in a sort of disorganized movement that doesn't raise real transitional demands. You spoke a little bit about sort of the program that was put forward and how we all just kind of had to accept it and work with what we have, right? But ultimately the program determines the direction of the movement. It determines where the movement is going to go and whether the revolutionary, whether any revolutionary potential can be created from it, right? So it's necessary to put forward actual transitional demands, such as to, you know, workers' control of the refineries, you know, or to occupy the banks, right? These are actual transitional demands, along with the demand for full citizenship rights for immigrants. This is the type of thing that will raise the consciousness of the Gilets jaunes. Unlike the MPA sort of attempts to push the existing consciousness to the left slightly, we need to raise real revolutionary transitional demands to change the class character of the movement entirely.
Yes, I would like to know, when you talk about a general strike in the whole country, how are the workers organized? They have only one centralized union, they have many different unions like we have here. I'm coming from Argentina, for instance, where it was a centralized union and the workers were able to do totally strike nationally. So I'm curious how it works in France.
I'll do one more.
Oh, I guess I have a, having worked in Lesbos with people crossing, you know, from Syria and other places and drowning in the sea. I have a problem with the wet foot, dry foot, of people crossing over the rights of people who are there. And I'm getting lost in my arguments. But I think this is kind of an anti-immigrant movement in a way, isn't it? It's really about the workers, the French workers in France. I mean, isn't it kind of protectionist? You have all these people who want to come from all over. Are they all going to have the? I mean, again, as I say, in Greece, you know, you have an unworkable situation where people are risking their lives to come because they think they have a right when they come, and they die. You know, and this is, you know, this is happening to people crossing over from North Africa. Do you think it's too far off topic?
No, all right. So on anti-Semitism and Israel and the fact that in France BDS is sanctioned and you will be targeted at anti-Semitism. Actually, it's not a problem that we face because
What's anti-Semitic? I'm sorry.
yeah, you know, boycott events, BDS, same here. So the Israeli state.
Well, I'm not talking about this.
I'm answering to the.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So the Israeli state and the government will target left or far left activists of being anti-Semitism. But actually, it's not the problem that we face because anti-Semitism was from the beginning a right-wing stuff. It was conspiracy theory, it was bank, and it was the media. And even if you look at far-right groups, they will not directly use anti-Semitism stuff. They will say, oh, we're against the banks. And you know, the banks, among the banks, there are some banks. And you know, the media, among the media, there are some media. And a lot of stuff like that. So it barely had anything to do with Israel. And even you will meet people that will say, I'm against Zionism, but they don't even know where Israel is or what kind of stuff was there. So it's not a main issue that we face, and on the contrary, it was possible to organize BDS people, like a fringe of this kind of people, to say no to anti-Semitism, stuff that we had difficulties to do for years. And actually, the Yellow Vests that came to the meeting against anti-Semitism, they came to the meeting, the far left meeting against anti-Semitism. That we organized different meetings than the one of the state or the one of the right wing against anti-Semitism, in order to distinguish ourselves from supporters of the Israeli state. On immigrant workers, actually, it's kind of difficult for us to answer because you are taking into account a narrative that is saying it's white workers against immigrant workers. If you look at Marseille. Marseille is a city in south of France, not so far from Algeria, where it's one of the main migrant cities in France. Even if it's one of the main point of the Yellow Vest. The Yellow Vest movement in November, it was the strongest in La Réunion, that is a French colony in the middle of the Indian Ocean, 10,000 kilometers, and it was there that the blockades were the strongest. So. It was a point since the beginning. Like some people were arguing, migrant workers are not there. But if you look at France, in countryside, in a lot of places, there are immigrants workers that are there. They are not only in big cities, because the factories and work is also in the countryside. So people came to work even in small cities or even in the countryside, and it's the case since 80 years. But on the matter of demands, that was the main point. Our point was to fight at the level it was. In December, the far right, they used the conspiracy theory about the pact of the EU. That was called the Marrakesh Pact. And they were saying, you know, they are selling France to Africa. A lot of millions of workers from North Africa will came in France. It didn't spread. And people didn't believe that. Actually, it's the point that the far right made in December because they were not allowed to speak. When the point was targeting the power, targeting the bosses' wages, the far right was not hadn't any space, barely any space to speak. So they tried to divide the movement into orientating against migrants. It didn't work. In the coordination of the east of France that we organized, the people that answered to the far right people on the migrant question, it was not us actually. It was like it was common yellow vest activists. So we could discuss what kind of demands could we have done in that, but it's not like not having demands for open border was stopping the movement to extend. If you look at even this picture, here it's a striking example. It's 1 hour and 30 minutes from Paris. It's in the middle of almost nowhere. If you look, we can see clearly because it was a video that was shown and the faces are not shown, but it's mostly sons of Arab workers from some auto plant in the Paris regions, and they were there 2 days after the main riot. Anyway.
I'm sorry, you're saying that some children of the farm workers, are you saying they're the children of the people who crossed over from North Africa?
Yeah, their parents are workers in the auto plant from Moroccan origin.
Right.
I wanted to answer to you too, because the Yellow Vest movement was quite organized on the social networks, and we have defended another way, but the social networks were very important during this movement, and the Facebook page I told about, the La France en colère, had the idea of block the country to fight against the capitalism or something like this. And one time, the Facebook pages proclaim, okay, this act, we're gonna fight for this or this. They give to the people some ideas of what we have, what we can do on this situation. And one time, the idea was to block the borders against the traffic with trucks and something like this. But it was, also like block the borders because the migrants are maybe the problem. And so in the headquarters of Strasbourg Republic, we are really close to the border of Germany, and there is a big bridge between Germany and France. And so we knew some yellow vest, Gelbwesten from the Germany, and we had the idea to go to the bridge and make a connection between the Germans and the French. And it was so cool because we didn't block the road, we were just on the, I don't know the name.
On the edges?
Yeah, and so all the people who goes to Germany to make the les courses.
To buy shops, to shop.
Yeah, in Germany the prices are very cheaper than in France, so it's only poor people, like people from the
Banlieue.
Yeah, so it was people from the banlieue who was Gilets jaunes, and so it's just a little example, but when we are from far left in this kind of movement, it's possible to transform some ideas which are quite horrible in something cool that gives some bravery to all the people who pass, say, okay, the yellow vests are still there, and all the yellow vests say, okay, there is support by the population, because it was during the little Christmas holidays, just after all things in Paris, and after December, the movement and during this moment, all the people were like in family to do the big meet with and so it was a great way to not die and to
excuse me, you have to answer this.
Yeah. So I still put the two questions, one on workers' control and the other on the union. I will answer obviously, and then we talk other questions.
Okay.
All right. So on unions, in France it's quite different from the US because you got a minority union. So it's unions with activists that are maybe more political than here. You don't have to vote inside the factory to be recognized or stuff like that. So you got some main unions. One was formerly linked with the CP. One was formerly linked with the Socialist Party. One is maybe more far left and stuff like that. What was striking is the fact that at the beginning they were saying it's right-wing stuff. And when the riots begin, the 6th of December, I mean, I'm always talking about the first week of December. But it was the time was when everything could have been made. It's like like in Strasbourg, you know, there are people that are meeting on social networks and stuff like that, and you just call for a meeting, then a few thousand people that just stays and discuss and they act together. They go to and they did everything.
And it's still alive today.
And it's still alive today, even if you don't have 4,400 people, you got 40. But it was the point. The CGT, so the main French workers' union, with almost all over union except from far left union, with some far left activists within it, condemned the rioters. They didn't say anything against the government. They condemned the rioters. So for a lot of people, it was seen as an insult among them. And after, in January and February, they slightly changed the discourse, but it was completely over. And they did their role as a union bureaucracy. At that time, something could have been made. They crushed it, and after it was late. On workers' control and demands. Actually, for us, it was not advocating for workers' control. I mean, in a theoretical way or in newspaper. The point was during the movement, a lot of issues came. Since few weeks and few months, there are a lot of factories that are closing. General Electric, they are firing 1,000 people in the east of France. Ford, they are firing 1,000 people in southwest of France, and stuff like that. The right wing, the union bureaucracy, they are saying it's a shame for the nation, our industry will be bad. They don't even speak about people that are fired. For us, it's exactly the movement where we can ask for the end of layoffs and push the struggle against layoff to the maximum that is possible. And in this kind of struggle, we can ask for workers' control of the factory, saying the bosses are leaving, maybe we can take the factory. But the point is, if we say that we are taking the factory back, what will you do? It's like Ford or General Electric. It's a big firm at international level. It means that if you take one factory there, you need to take factory in other places and stuff like that. So for us, it's a way to engage the struggle, and then the struggle will go on. It's not from the beginning having the wrong, having the good or the right demands. Also because some people against firing are fighting for bonuses, for instance. People that think that it's already over. Us, it's not saying like, oh, you're fighting for bonuses, it's not good. It's like, all right, you're fighting for bonuses. In other factories, they are fighting against the closure of the factory. So we should all be together in order that we become a political fact, and the government will be in the worst position. And it's that way that we could impeach, that we could stop layoffs. In this kind of situation, where it's not a revolutionary situation, like we could take the factory like that.
And I think that the situation in the emergency service in hospitals in France is a good example of this, because I'm a nurse student, and during the month of December, all my colleagues were talking about the Yellow Vest movement, to say, oh yes, I agree with the demands, and even if with the riot way of doing, they are right to fight, and if they have to burn some cars anyway, and now the movement in the emergency. I think that it's because of the atmosphere of the Yellow Vest that I'm sorry, it's difficult to explain, but
it's red.
It's red.
It's red.
Yes. And no, but it's just like the situation in hospital in France is worse and worse year after year, and all the colleagues say, oh, it's an awful situation. But it's just now they take bravery from, I think, the atmosphere made by the yellow vest to fight. And it's maybe one of the points that the yellow vest could spread, yeah. Because it's difficult from the yellow vest to go to the factories to say, oh, go on, make the strike now, but it can give ideas of it's possible to fight and to win something. Yeah.
Yeah, I read a report in the papers here about a demonstration, a yellow vest demonstration in a provincial town. And they were talking about the various political forces that were intervening. They said the Rassemblement National was very active. I forget which town this was, but they said that the Rassemblement National of Marine Le Pen were very active there. They said they didn't see too many activists from the left. There was one member of the PCF, the Communist Party in the town, and he was a professor, and he didn't attend, and he said, because he said his schedule didn't permit it, and he just advised everybody to join the PCF. So, I was wondering if you could give us some idea of, as I understand, as someone said that Louis Touvrière was characteristically abstentionist. I wonder if you could give us some idea of what forces in the French left have been active in the Yellow Vest movement, and on what basis, on what political basis.
And then what can we do in the United States to help?
To help us?
Maybe another one.
I'd be kind of curious to know the people who are wearing yellow vests in the crowd, why you're wearing yellow vests and what that means to you, especially knowing that this movement is right and left. I mean, it's all across the board. Would you be willing also to be part of a movement where you have this kind of right consciousness as well? I mean, you're wearing something, it's a symbol for you, so I'm curious.
What you want me to address that?
Yeah, as well.
All right. So my answer to your question is, okay.
No, please go ahead.
All right. Well, my answer to your question is this. Historically, ruling elites have operated by divide and conquer. And when you go into this, I'm a Marxist, I'm a right-winger, I'm black, I'm white, all these political ideologies and ethnic groups have been used to separate movements. So when you say something like immigration, if you have a broad, wide tent encompassing a lot of people, you have to vote on it. You're going to have to be democratic if you do not want us to go down the divide and conquer drain. And so, to answer your question, I'm about a group that we could get Americans, because I'm thinking of in the United States, and I what you're doing, to fight the neoliberal powers, to restore democracy, to get our elections back, to end the wars, big broad strokes that everybody agrees with, whether you're right, left, or whatever, because Medicare for all, maybe I think most Americans are for that. So I would pick some big issues: the military-industrial complex, the banks, because we're all getting screwed over by the economy, and maybe a third one. Those are the two big ones. If you don't deal with that, you're not going to
National security.
and a surveillance state, and that's something we all agree on. Let's focus on some major issues. Put the divide and conquer. Let's not fight about abortion. Let's not fight about gay marriage. I mean, I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-gay marriage. But man, that's when the shit goes down. Even immigration, yeah. We have to put that on the back burner, put it to a vote, and that's my viewpoint.
Go ahead, I'll say one answer.
About the what can we do in the USA? Actually, it's I don't think, and I will not be demagogical. It's quite difficult to do some stuff directly in the in the US about this kind of movement. What I think is very important is the fact that a class struggle is taking place internationally. When I'm talking about layoffs in Ford and General Electric, a lot of people in France will say, "Oh, it's an American company. Let's have the French flag and stuff like that." I think one of the main points is also to here in the US, but also all over the world, to fight against this kind of company. It's one of the main things, if it's possible, to struggle together against this kind of company. Ford, they are organizing layoffs all over Europe. So we are also trying to organize the common struggle in France, in Germany, where this kind of factories are. Another thing that is very important, it's like in this kind of movement, we are debating which kind of demand, what is the class character of the movement, what could the revolutionary do. It could seem like it's nothing. For us, it's very important. Why are we coming here? We are coming here in order to discuss a political program of a revolutionary organization and a political strategy for revolutionary activists. Just being there in the US, analyzing the movement, trying to discuss it, trying to organize, if it's possible, struggles against the big firms that are also in Europe, in Africa and in Asia, I think it's one of our main tasks today. Because we can say the struggles are great, we need to emphasize the struggle and stuff like that. But the point here is that all over the world today, there are a lot of people that are fighting. In Algeria, in Sudan, in China, in India, in a lot of places. What we are missing, it's a political organization organized at international level that will allow people to join and to fight for a revolutionary program that is for us the Trotskyist program. So what you need to do here in the US, it's to help people that want to fight and that need to understand to fight to go there. On the Rassemblement National and why did they came in roundabouts and stuff like that. Actually, it's not the main far-right activists that we face, not Rassemblement National, because they didn't care so much about the movement, they care about the elections. And the ones that we face were truly fascists that are trying, for instance, people that were trying at the beginning to organize protests in order to attack police or stuff like that. Like they were believe in a fascist coup. This kind of people we face them. Not the Rassemblement National.
Who are these people?
I can give you the name of the group. But... So, there are some kind of these people, but they were expelled from the movement very rapidly. The ones that we are facing, and we should say it about it, it's conspiracy theories, like anti-Semitic people and people like that. There are through social... that people, that will say, oh, the main problem is Europe. Even here, there was a forum earlier with this kind of people. And they came here like putting the yellow vest, saying they are yellow vest activists. When we're in France, they will not be allowed to come 500 meters from the left forum if they try to come. For us, so it's this kind of small parties that are having a huge impact on the working class, on anti-Semitism, on conspiracy theory, and this kind of people we had to fight all the time during the movement until now. Yeah. One point of the people, like what they were trying to do, the far right, it was after the 10th or the 15th, the 10th of December, the government will give social aids. So, for instance, my wage that is 1,040 euro, 400 euros. That is more or less the same in the US. Now, after the movement, I'm earning 150 euros more per month. That is not nothing. It's more than 10% of my wage. So a lot of people gave that after the 10th of December, but it was difficult for some part of the movement, some fringe of the movement, to think that they will earn more, that they will gain, they will have some more gains. So some far right, but also some left people think of a clever idea, like Rebellious France. For instance, Rebellious France on a migrant issue, they completely didn't talk about that. Even if in previous years they were saying we need to close borders and stuff like that, in the movement they didn't advocate for that. I think because they felt that it was not the atmosphere to say, hey, I'm not saying that they are for opening borders, but in this movement they didn't think that it was the moment to push for this kind of demands. But the point was that they were saying, all right, you're asking for more democracy. So the main enemy is the journalists, it's the establishment, it's the elite. And us, the people, we are together against a small, tiny minority. That is not the bosses, it's the establishment. And it is this kind of ways, this kind of argument that we had a lot of difficulty to face. But if you look at the demands that went through local meetings, almost no demands is on that. But for instance, they said we need to organize referendum, like a regular referendum, and it was a way to say, all right, we've lost, we only have some more social aids, but we'll not get more, so maybe we can have an institutional stuff that will allow us to continue to fight through electoral stuff. And it's one of the ideas that we had a lot of difficulty to face, because people saying like, we want to vote, we want to have a referendum. For people without the background, yes, why not? I mean, at the beginning of the 19th century in the UK, workers were fighting for a right to vote, and then and they thought at that time, with a lot of illusions, that when they will get the right to vote, they will be in power. This kind of idea we also face, and when you put that with conspiracy theory, it's kind of difficult. So the Rassemblement National was there, but he was there to watch. Because one thing is very important, even if you look at the polls, a lot of Yellow Vest supporters, not Yellow Vest activists, but people that watch the movement, voted for the National Front. For the National Front, they just have to wait that the movement will not go further. And then after the disappointment, they will collect the vote. And it was their main plan since the beginning.
Je peux dire si, non mais je suis pas sûre que ça veut dire que Philippe a monté une liste gilets jaunes.
Yeah, but for instance, one of the main leaders of the Rassemblement National that broke with them last year because he wanted to add on their program to break with the EU, that the Rassemblement National takes that out of their program. He presented a list and he made like maybe 100,000 votes, that is 0.5% at the election. And he was the first guy. Maybe, I don't remember when, but maybe the 15th of November, so 2 days before the beginning, to go to the state office and say, all right, I got a property of the name Gilets jaunes. But it was a failure. About Lutte ouvrière. It's kind of difficult for us to say, because Lutte ouvrière is the main far-left organization in France, and they have grassroots activists in a lot of plants and almost all over France. The point is that at the beginning of the movement, they were trying to organize strikes in Saturdays. And us with them and others, some anarchists, some NPI activists, they also do that. The point is like the bosses, they organize lockouts in this time. So like occupying the factory through organizing a general meeting on Saturday on factory was impossible because the factories were closed. So we couldn't go inside. They tried to do it the week after, and actually it was kind of a success because they just have to say, all right, we'll organize a close, we'll organize a strike, and then for a lot of people it was a victory. They didn't see that having the factory closed will not enable them to organize in the workplace. So for a lot of workers, all right, the factory is closed, thanks for Lutte ouvrière activists because they called for a strike. Even if we didn't know if the strike would have been followed, it was looking like a victory. They did that, they went on roundabouts the week after with some people from the union, or people from the auto. I'm speaking about autoplane because it's what I know the best, but they also did that in other sectors. They went in roundabouts, and actually it was not so much difficult because the roundabouts that were occupied were very close to industrial area, where you got production, logistic, transport, and stuff like that. So they take people from inside the factory to go outside the factory to discuss and stuff like that. And the third weeks of the movement, they organize with actually we did it through railway workers, because for us it was easy to organize railway workers, because there has been 3 strikes of railway workers since 5 years that were huge strikes. Only in one enterprise, but last year there were 50,000 railway workers striking for 3 months. Even if it was not every day of the week. They were defeated thanks to the union bureaucracy that had a crazy plan. But us, we had a lot of people ready to experience a lot of stuff with us. So we organized workers' poll through railway workers, and we are calling for protests in Paris to join the Yellow Vest March, but under the flag and the banners of railway workers. I didn't take the pictures, but the second week of November, we had like a banner of maybe 35 meters in the middle of Champs-Élysées, that is the main city, saying railway workers will organize a rail crash of will make Macron crash, like he will fall. So we tried to do that. And then after they were a little bit convinced with us, and they came in this kind of protest. But actually their main goal was to push pressure inside the unions in order to call the union bureaucracy to call for strikes that they didn't, that they weren't successful to do. And the point is like, maybe they are the people that went the most in the roundabouts and that knew the Gilets jaunes the most, because they are the most working class organization that are in a lot of places of France. But they had the idea that I think is wrong, is saying the movement began outside of the union. So is it a workers' movement? We're not sure. And they hesitated, they had some hesitation for weeks. But after, when no huge scale strikes happened, they kept this idea in mind, like they were us, the workers' movement, the revolutionary, and on the other hand, the Yellow Vest. That is, I think, wrong, because they are confusing unions and the unions and the working class. And if you look in France, where less than 8% of the workforce is unionized, it's a craziness, especially among this kind of fringe of the working class. People from the countryside, far from cities. And actually it's a mistake that the NPA did the same. A lot of other far-left groups did the same. Because for them, coming from outside the union was very difficult. And it's exactly the same. It's not exactly, but it's...
And too far right too.
Yeah, and there were also some far right, so it gives them a lot of argument. And actually it's this kind of stuff that is very important for us, because the way they are putting the problem is the same that in the last uprising of some fringe of the working class that was not unionized. The suburbs riots nearby Paris. It was not the union, they were young people, they were sometimes unemployed. They didn't recognize them as a fringe of the working class. So they are making a confusion between the political situation that they think is very bad, because people are not in union, because they are not left and stuff like that. And what is really happening is like workers fighting. And it's maybe, I think, our main difference with them, because we don't think the situation is bad because people are not in union. For instance, here, when I said we failed to organize national coordination of Yellow Vest, yes, we failed, but it was much way easier to try, it's just an example, much way easier to try without the union bureaucracy. And because we didn't face the bureaucrat directly. If we are trying now to organize a national coordination of workers facing layoffs, the first word that we have is the union bureaucracy. So, and even there are debates within the French bourgeoisie nowadays, because they are crushing the union with a lot of measures, and even among them, they are debating about whether they should crush completely the union, or maybe they could be useful, because, you know, if there's this kind of uprising, having some people that they are able to deal with could be a good stuff.
Comprador unions.
So, sorry?
Comprador unions.
Comprador unions.
Other questions?
Yeah, just a quick question, actually a quick comment unrelated to the question, is that, because it came up before with Semitic. Semitic, Zionism, and Judaism, three distinct, completely separate, but everyone keeps linking Semitic with Judaism, which is not. You could be Semitic, Palestinians are Semitic. You could be atheist and Semitic. So it shouldn't be related. And then Judaism is pretty much about peace. Zionism, not quite so. So sometimes people get mixed up. But if it's anti-Semitic, it's just like, well, what do you got to choose? Are you talking about Judaism, are you talking about Zionism, or are you talking about Semitic people?
But it's not separate in Europe. It's kind of all mixed together.
Depends on who you're talking to and stuff. Even over
No,
here,
in general,
even
Europe,
over here,
France,
it's mixed together.
Spain, it's kind of all mixed together.
It's mixed together over here too. This is why you gotta break it. Let people know these are three. Don't let them mix it together.
Right.
You don't split it up.
Right.
Yeah,
because they mix it all together.
It gets mixed, and it's done that way on purpose. But
Exactly.
what we're trying to do is just try to bring people together. So. My question was, there's pretty much a news blackout over here about the yellow vest. You don't hear anything. So I was looking for what the website or source. You mentioned Speak Out Now. Is that a website or?
That's our organization. We have literature.
Yeah.
There's some on the table you can get.
All right.
But our best sources are our French comrades who we're in touch with when they come here. So you can ask them more when we're done here. If you're
I figured maybe someone else.
Actually, we've written one leaflet every week since 8 months, trying to engage with the movement. And every week, because it was the main issue actually in France, everyone was looking at it, so we speak of it since months. And it's also the link with May 68. For us, what kind of interesting stuff? It was for decades in France. There was no new layer of society or new layer of the working class that really wanted to fight, and that were not part of the union or part of the left. And for decades, we have been preparing for this moment where when some workers, they will not fight only within the unions or they will not fight within the left party, but they were really trying to engage into politics. And now it's trying to engage into politics, saying, all right, politics. So it's one of our main points. You can also look at Lutouvrière stuff or NPS stuff that are translated. But we got a website on Speak Out Now. A lot of groups are having it.
What time of day and week, is it during business hours when you have your meetings? Or on weekends or what?
In the summer?
I don't know, you said you've met a lot, you're talking about several different times, and sometimes they were weekly.
Yeah.
What time of day and what day of the week?
So the headquarters is meeting on Monday, and it's quite like 4 hours of discussion.
What times?
From which hour?
Right.
From 6 p.m. 6 p.m. to 10. And for the demonstration of the Saturdays, it's always the General Assembly take place at 10 a.m. at the Republic Place. And after we go to demo at midday, and it go through all day, like till 6 or 7 p.m. So it's quite long and difficult demonstration to do all the time. But all the yellow vests are moving through this timing.
What is striking about the time? It's like you say, like someone they are meeting every week, like for 4 hours after work at like 6 p.m. Because us as activists, we are always trying to find a way. Her, she's having children. Him is working by night, and so we need to meet. We need to find the proper hour. I mean, it's our preoccupation, especially if you want to organize workers. But what is striking them? It's like people they run after work in order to go to the meeting. And it's the case since 8 months. That's why also for us it's a kind of working class activities that we hadn't seen since decades.
Let's see. This follows. Your day-long protest, when you protest and block the street and you're talking about,
Yeah.
was that on a weekday? Did you take off of work, is what I'm asking?
Or were those on the weekends?
No, actually it took place on weekends, but there were also action organized at night. Actually, it's one of the main one of the main difficulties that we face, because there were no massive strikes. You could not, it was difficult to organize workers on weekdays. We organized students, we organized unemployed, retired people, but we couldn't go through this step. And
The workers were here for a few times, but it's a very tiring movement. So they was here and now not anymore, and it's more like the students or the retirees that we are here for. Yeah.
And actually, it's one of also it's linked to another point of fight that we had with left people. For instance, reformists, rebellious friends, and people like that. They were saying, you know, it's a citizen movement. We don't care. They organize protests on weekends. All right, it's amazing. The movement is great. It's great. When they wouldn't face the problem that because there was no strike, it was difficult to organize workers or even to have some workers' democracy. So it was one of the main fights. And even some anarchist people or some reformist people, they tried to organize some coordination. But they organized 2 coordination in 8 months.
Yeah, the third today.
And the third is this weekend. But they didn't want to talk about wages. And I mean, I'm talking about the left-wing people like Mélenchon, I don't know, maybe it would be the DSA or some people like that. They didn't want to talk about wages. Of course, we went there, we fight, we defended this kind of coordination, but we've lost. For the moment, maybe it will change. And they didn't want to speak about strikes and stuff like that. So it was one of our main fights. But pointy, there was strike in hospital for teachers and postal workers also. There is a huge spread of postal worker strikes. But it was not in January, it was not in February. For us, it was quite kind of difficult. But the point was not to say, all right, there are no class struggle inside the autoplane or the workplaces, so nothing is happening. Because a lot of movements, or political movements, are also happening outside the factory gate. And us, even if it was not our priority, it was a point to try to engage politics with the people that went outside the factory in order to do politics.
Well, one of the problems I think that Marxists face all over the Western world is that the places where industry used to be, and especially these provincial places like the U.S. In the Midwest of the U.S., provincial France, where these industries are leaving, and industrial populations are becoming non-industrial. But these are the people who are playing a very important role in. Some of them are being attracted to the far right, but in France, some of them are engaged in a movement. You might even say they are the most important element of the movement. Non-industrial people, former workers in the provinces. Now, so in terms of political strategy, how do you see, in other words, do you see unions and striking and industrial activity as forming the core of such a movement? I mean, I know you think the movement necessarily involves strikes, it involves industrial activity, but do you see that as the main axis of struggle around which the entire movement, a movement like this, should be organized, or do you see other axes of struggle?
I'm not sure, but very recent recently we had the idea of doing a meeting of all the yellow vests who are workers in this place or this place to speak about what are your problems in your factory and how can we put the yellow vest demands on the industry. I don't know if it's clear.
On the entrance of the factory?
Yeah, to try to make a link between the yellow vest and factories, and now the result is a little like journal which speaks about what's going on the factory, and they wanted to do a demonstration on last Saturdays to make support for the nurses in strike. So we tried some link like this, but it's difficult. I don't know if it's an answer.
Well, I was wondering if you, because you were talking about how various organizations like Yellow were confusing working class struggle with trade union struggle. If it wasn't trade union, it wasn't properly working class. Assuming that a much larger component, say if you compare this to the 30s and 40s, older struggles in capitalism, you're going to have a much larger component which is non-unionized and non-industrial. But do you see the political movement of these people necessarily having to orient themselves around industrial struggles, to follow industrial workers in industrial struggles, or various kinds of workers, or do you see some other kinds of political strategies emerging here which involve, but do not centrally involve industrial?
Actually, I think actually it will depend. I mean, if in small cities 40 people that are working in a small plant and stuff like that regularly meet twice a week, will not organize them, or will not try to organize them in big factories, because they are for the moment in small factories, because it's a movement that is still there, and there are a lot of do in small workplace, and it's there that the French, the German workers movement was born. So there are stuff to do inside. If the movement is decreasing, and you don't have 40 people but only 4, I think that we will try to convince them to go to work and to be active within big plants, because it's there that there are much opportunities. Not only opportunities of being active, but also political opportunity. If you look at the two movements that we discussed, outside of the yellow vest, not outside, but that are not directly yellow vest, the General Electric layoffs. General Electric, it's a big plant in the main, one of the two main working class regions in France. Since General Electric announced that they will fire 1,000 people, everyone in France is staring at them. So revolutionary activists that could have been in this place could do a lot of stuff. The main problem is not that the factory is not big enough or stuff like that. It's the policy of the union activists and the left activists within this kind of factory. So there are still big plants that everyone is looking at. If you look at hospital workers, what is striking is the fact that it's their demand for wages, but also also the fact that it's spread through hospitals in Paris, where you got 80,000 workers there. And at the beginning it was 20, then 25, and so on and so forth. People from these big hospitals in Paris that were struggling. It's not that there were more struggles if we take into account the wage demand. If we don't take into account this demand, it's not that there were more struggles, but this struggle is happening in the main hospital in France. Then a lot of hospitals all over France started. This hospital from the countryside in France were quite important because the austerity measures are worse in the countryside, especially for this kind of hospital. It's in Paris or in the Paris region, it's much, it's maybe less worse. So there was a lot of struggle into the countryside among hospital workers. But from the moment big hospital in Paris region were striking, it changed everything. Like people, they coordinating themselves. For instance, the hospital workers, they were asking for demands. They called in 3 weeks that all hospital workers that are striking should meet in Paris. There were, I think, 80 hospitals represented in the conference that they called 3 days before, and only through social networks. This kind of stuff, since the 80s, didn't happen. People were waiting for a union to act. There is people, mostly young people that are under 35, under 30, women workers that are trying to organize that. And I think it was easier because the call came from the biggest hospital in Paris. So us as a group, but I think for the far left it is all. For sure, there are people fighting in small factories, or people that are fighting that are working in small factories will not abandon them like that. But our main target are still the big plants. Yeah. Another thing that is important is like, and I join you on the point that you make. It's not because it's not inside the factories that it's not working class stuff. If you look, for instance, in Algeria, Algeria actually is quite close from France, but the problems are different. But people are staring at each other from the two sides of the sea. A lot of people think that it was the same political problem. People that were not striking in big plants, in oil industry, because in Algeria the oil workers are well paid, and actually there are not so much industry in Algeria. It's less than 5% of their GDP. But the issue was there. Who will say stuff are not happening within the factory, so there is nothing to do? What we think in Algeria and what we discuss with Algerian comrades was the thing, it's not happening in big factories, so you need to organize at the neighborhood, working class neighborhood level, for instance.
Are there any more questions?
I guess he was kind of asking, and I'm curious how you've transformed your politics since you're like self-proclaimed Trotskyist, no? And if you've transformed, and if you've seen the left transform through this movement, like, has this movement also transformed you?
Yes.
Well, I noticed it. But also, you were very self-proclaimed, being in a very specific political position, no? With a history to it. Have you changed at all any of your, or transformed any of your ideas to include other ideas, or, and of course, also...
Yeah.
So for instance, this kind of idea that you're making, that it was not in big plans that it will begin. I didn't think, for us it was in big plans, because the last strike, it was railway workers. That is one of the main employee of France, one of the biggest industry. So for us, it could have begun there, but we got some stuff making make us reminding that it could also came from other places. This kind of stuff. It's not that I changed my idea, but alright, it's a reminder that something can come completely from outside what we were thinking about. But on the other hand, not so much. What is striking? It's like the demand for a €200 wage hike. We were saying, oh, you know, we are for that. We are not so much convinced. Actually, it was in our program, but people they didn't believe in it so much. Now I believe in it and this kind of demand to unify the working class against this demand on wage more than ever, because it came through real demands. Another point, it's like, you know, whenever you meet someone during political activity, you are having meetings and stuff like that. You're asking, maybe we should stay in touch, we should discuss, and maybe you could come. Actually, during the movement, in December and January, it was not the case. People were coming at us saying, oh, maybe I should get your number. I will call you back. And if you didn't call the guy back, he will call you back twice a week. It was this kind of stuff, like we are more convinced than ever that a lot of stuff is possible, because the atmosphere in France completely changed. And in this kind of events, you got the conviction that everything is possible.
Yeah, and just for me, I'm an activist of far left, and it was truly the first time that I do a movement with people from far right, and I have seen how it's possible to see some people changing their minds about a lot of questions, and it's really enthusiastic for the future, because I think it's I don't know, but it's quite not easy but natural to speak with them, and to they are not activists from far right, okay? Just they had like ideas. It makes me see more what is the situation on which we are. I don't know if it's understandable, but it seems to, it's okay. A lot of people think that the problem comes from the migrants, and it's not just a word, it's a reality, but by a movement, by social and political demands, it's quite easy to abandon all these ideas and just to live on really particular things together. And now they are like friends. It's, yeah, and I don't know how it's how the thing's gonna continue, because it's I've lived something with them like with nobody else. It's difficult to explain, but yeah, that's cool.
Folks, it's obviously the time. I think new people are
maybe
walking in now, so we have one final question, so please just address this one final question.
The influence internationally in the surrounding countries that you're seeing, the Yellow Vest movement having influence in Spain, other parts of Europe, in North Africa. Are you seeing it spreading, is what I'm asking? Outside France.
Spain, we have our own movement.
Yeah.
In Germany, there was a little group of far right who headed the Yellow Vests, but not quite so much. It didn't work.
There was like 50 of us one time in Berlin trying to do a left.
Really? Yeah. It was Pegida?
No, I'm saying left-wing people doing an action, solidarity with the Yellow Vests, things like that. Did not catch on at all. No, it was totally dominated by the right in Germany.
Okay.
We tried, yeah.
All right. Thanks all for coming. And,
yeah, thank you. It was very informative.